Good morning, I'm harleysch from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for August 31st, 2023. I'm going to be looking at the continuing implications of the tectonic shift that's occurred in the aftermath of the BRICS conference in South Africa, as developments are showing that what we were warning about, or actually what we were discussing, hopefully, is that a change is occurring, a dramatic change against the unipolar order, against the idea that the West can dominate the world and subjugate nations to their so-called rules-based order. Now let's take a look at what this rules-based order actually represents by focusing on what Henry Kissinger said in 1969 to the ambassador or the foreign minister of Chile, Gabriel Valdez. Kissinger said, quote, "Nothing important can come from the South. History has never been produced in the South. What happens in the South is of no importance," unquote. Henry Kissinger, who was then the advisor, national security advisor to President Richard Nixon. Now listen to what Brazil's President Lula said in Angola on August 25th after the BRICS summit. He said, quote, "The countries of the South decided to organize themselves, and we decided that we will no longer accept being treated as insignificant," unquote. And there was a similar statement from President Arce of Bolivia, who announced the intention of his country to join the BRICS. He said that the BRICS institution, quote, "allows nations to access international markets without having to compromise their dignity and without political conditions, sanctions, or militaristic intimidation," unquote. In other words, adios economic hitmen, goodbye IMF, goodbye World Economic Forum. We are now pursuing our own sovereign national interests. This is the end of subservience, and this is the beginning of the adoption of a sovereign view for all nations. And this centers around taking control of credit away from Wall Street and City of London banks and putting it into the hands of nations and national governments, which will now be freed to invest, and that is to create credit to invest in their own physical economy, using such institutions as the New Development Bank of the BRICS. Invest in what? Power generation, manufacturing, refining and using their own natural resources, and in transportation infrastructure. This is something that Lyndon LaRouche had been discussing for many, many years, and this is now the revolution which is taking place. Now, in the past, coups and assassination were a weapon used by the US, British, and other European intelligence and military operations to remove nationalist governments and to impose instead governments willing to do the bidding of the multinational corporations. This was characterized in a book by John Perkins as the deployment of economic hitmen. His book, The Confession of an Economic Hitman, told the story of how he worked to create new debt of governments in the South, in the developing sector, new debt to multinational corporations, which then was used, that volume of debt was used as an excuse for the International Monetary Fund to dictate economic policy to those nations. Well, that era is over. The development of the BRICS represents this change. Now, let's take a concrete example of this, what's happening in what used to be called French West Africa. There have been coups in the last couple of years, including in the last couple of days, in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and now in Gabon, where the military intervened on behalf of national interests against governments which instead were acting in the interests of the French government and French corporate cartels. Now, there have been threats from France and from the European Union to intervene militarily to overturn the coup in Niger. Will the French government be able to get other African governments through ECOWAS to launch the counter-coup? Or will the French dare to repeat what they did in Libya, where they worked with the British and the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton to bomb and destroy that nation, kill its leader, and break it up into rival militias, destroying the development that had been taking place under Gaddafi? Now, we're seeing other examples of the overturning of Western intervention. Just yesterday, a court in Pakistan overturned the conviction and sentencing of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. We don't know yet whether he's been released and what will happen, but what's clear is that his removal was ordered by the economic hitmen working with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. When he was removed by a vote of no confidence, Blinken sent a tweet, this is in March 2022, congratulating the interim prime minister for Khan's removal. Now, what was Khan's crime? He refused to condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Not only that, he visited Moscow. There were cables released that showed that Blinken's deputies met with the Pakistani ambassador to the U.S. to criticize Khan for being neutral. Later, a note was sent saying that if he is removed by a no-confidence vote, quote, all will be forgiven in Washington, unquote. That is the go-ahead to Pakistan military networks to remove Khan because of his position of neutrality. That message was sent by Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu, clearly with Blinken's backing. Now, the anger at Khan was for refusing to go along with the West is what led to this coup. But he addressed a rally, Khan did, before he was put in prison. And he said that of the attacks on him in Pakistan, are we your slaves? And he said, we are not part of any alliance, asserting Pakistan's sovereign right to remain neutral. Now, once he was removed, Pakistan dropped neutrality and sided with the United States in the war in Ukraine. But Khan remains highly popular, and that may explain what happened with the appeals court, which overturned his sentence and ordered him released from 2 days ago. So we'll see what happens. But keep in mind, in the past, leaders in Pakistan have been assassinated for resisting U.S. demands. Ali Bhutto and his daughter, Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, were both assassinated for refusing to go along with the demands of the economic hitmen of the U.S. government in Washington. So this is what has been overturned by the assertion of sovereign rights, which we're seeing from the BRICS, what we're seeing from African nations, what we're seeing in Latin America, a refusal to continue to be subservient to the international economic hitmen. Now, what is at stake now is in the future is what will the global north do? What will Washington do? What will the City of London do? What will NATO do? Will they continue these wars, such as the war in Ukraine against Russia? Will they launch a war against China? Because China is at the center of the BRICS, along with Russia. Will they launch civil wars and assassinations throughout Africa and South America? Well, it could happen. There have been assassinations in Ecuador in the last couple of days. So we're at a very tempestuous moment in world history, but one which cries out for the conscience of Americans and Western Europeans to act on behalf of sovereign nations that are asserting their sovereign rights for development. So I'd urge you to listen to my dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche yesterday, where she took this up with great passion. And I'll include the link in the description section so that you can get get a much better sense, a clearer sense of the era which we are now entering. Now, tomorrow will be Friday. I'll take your questions and comments. You can send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.